The tow truck arrived at 5:17 a.m. No lights, no warning, just the low hiss of hydraulics and the clank of a chain against steel. By the time I opened the front door, they were already lifting the front wheels off the ground. I was still in slippers. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted, stepping out into the gravel driveway. One of the men, probably in his mid-30s, clipboard in hand, sunglasses still fogged from the morning air, didn't even look up. "HOA violation," he said flatly. "Vehicle has to go." Vehicle? It wasn't just a vehicle. It was my grandfather's 1949 Ferguson tractor. The same one he used to plow his first field in South Carolina. The same one that was restored, with parts shipped from 3 different states, over a decade. The same one the Smithsonian Institution had registered as a Class 4 historic agricultural vehicle last spring. But none of that mattered to them. "You don't have jurisdiction over this," I said, stepping closer. "This isn't some rusted-out lawnmower. This machine is in the federal registry." The second guy, younger, maybe new, looked uneasy. He glanced between me and the clipboard. "Sir, we're just following the HOA's order. It says here it's classified as non-operational equipment stored in a visible area." "Do you even know what you're towing?" I snapped. "You're about to scratch the original fenders on a machine that helped feed 60 families after the war." He shrugged. "If you have an issue, take it up with the board." That's when I noticed her. Karen. Real name, Kimberly Adams. But no one ever called her that anymore. Standing across the street in her pastel cardigan and low-heeled shoes, arms folded neatly, phone raised, recording. She didn't flinch when I caught her eye. She just smiled. That tight, smug little smile I'd come to associate with her reign over Magnolia Bend. She knew exactly what she was doing. This wasn't about the tractor. It never was. It was about control. 2 months earlier, I had stood up at the HOA meeting and challenged her proposed aesthetic streamlining initiative. She wanted to ban everything from birdbaths to decorative mailboxes. My tractor? She claimed it was agriculturally disruptive. Whatever that meant in a cul-de-sac surrounded by hedges and hybrids. The room had been silent when I spoke. But I saw the nods. The looks of agreement. That scared her. Now, here we were. And the sound of that engine groaning as they dragged away 75 years of family history? It burned into my chest like acid. I grabbed my phone, started filming, got their license plate, captured Karen smirking in the background like this was some kind of victory parade. But I didn't post the video. Not yet. Because I knew what was coming next. By noon, the HOA had delivered a letter to my mailbox. Official seal. Pompous language. "Your recent behavior during the lawful removal of a non-compliant item has been deemed hostile and inappropriate. Repercussions may follow in accordance with our Civility Code, Article 9, Section B." Hostile? I hadn't even raised my voice. But they wanted me to feel boxed in. Alone. They didn't know me very well. The next morning, I drove to the local DMV, then to the County Heritage Office, then finally to the regional Smithsonian affiliate. I brought photos, receipts, restoration logs. I brought the registration certificate with the federal seal, signed by a curator who'd worked in historical preservation for 32 years. But that wasn't all I found. Turns out, Magnolia Bend HOA had no legal claim over agricultural machinery registered under federal designation, even if it was stored in view. Karen had overstepped. Again. I called a meeting. Not through the HOA, through the community newsletter. The one Karen tried to kill last year when we printed a cartoon of her measuring grass blades. We called it The Rusty Truth. By Friday evening, my yard was filled with folding chairs. Neighbors trickled in. Some hesitant, others furious. A few had their own stories. "I got a violation for wind chimes," said Marie from 2 blocks down. "Said it disrupted the soundscape." "My son was cited for chalk art," another man added. "A freaking sidewalk drawing of a dinosaur." I stood on the porch and held up the registration certificate. "This," I said, voice cracking just slightly, "isn't about old machinery. It's about memory. About autonomy. And it's about one person thinking she can rewrite the rules because she wears the crown." They nodded. They were ready. But Karen wasn't done. Saturday morning, I woke up to find a new violation taped to my front window. Unauthorized community assembly. Unregistered use of public viewing area. She was calling my lawn a public space now? That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just a personal grudge. This was a war. And I wasn't going to fight it alone. By Monday morning, my front lawn had turned into a battleground. Not in the messy, chaotic way you'd expect. No shouting, no picket signs, just silence. Tight-lipped neighbors walking their dogs a little slower as they passed my house. Heads turning, whispers exchanged. Like the whole block had been told I was radioactive. Karen's doing, of course. Sometime between Sunday night and sunrise, she'd circulated an emergency bulletin to all residents. A glossy flyer slipped neatly into every mailbox. Dangerous disinformation campaign underway. Protect your community. In smaller print beneath. Certain individuals are attempting to incite discord and civil unrest under false pretenses. Compliance is not optional. No names. But it didn't have to. Everyone knew who certain individuals meant, and just to drive it home, she included a grainy screenshot of my Facebook post, the one showing the tow truck hauling my grandfather's tractor down Evergreen Lane. Captioned, "Manipulated media intended to spread fear." She was trying to discredit me, to make it look like I was the problem. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what came with it, a notice stapled to the bulletin board outside the rec center. Petition to revoke Mr. Parker's community privileges pending board review. Community privileges. That meant I'd be barred from the pool, the gym, the library, even the HOA town halls, the same ones I used to attend every month where I volunteered for park cleanup duty and helped design the Veterans Day flyers. Suddenly I was a threat, and Karen? She was consolidating power. But I still had one thing she didn't expect: proof. Real proof. Not hearsay or Facebook posts. I had documents, paper trails, county records, so I printed it all. 3 full binders. 1 for the city attorney's office, 1 for the local Channel 4 reporter, and 1 for anyone in the neighborhood who dared to ask what really happened. But I needed more than just paperwork. I needed a voice that couldn't be ignored. So I called my niece, Ellie. She's a junior producer at a regional podcast called Civic Pulse. Small following, but respected. The kind of audience that paid attention when local power was abused. I told her everything. The tractor, the registration, the tow, Karen's smear campaign, the silence that followed. By Tuesday afternoon, Ellie had a reporter outside my house, microphone in hand. "Tell me about the day it was towed," she asked. "What did you feel?" I looked into the lens and told the truth. I felt like someone reached into my family's past and dragged it across the street like junk. And now they want to erase the fact it ever mattered. We talked for 20 minutes. Calm. Director. No shouting, no slander. Just facts. And by Wednesday morning, the story dropped. When the HOA came for a Smithsonian registered tractor, within hours, it was being shared on Reddit. Then next door. Then a local heritage preservation group reposted it with the caption, "How far is too far for HOAs?" That's when the messages started. Private texts, DMS, voicemails from neighbors who had once looked the other way. "Hey, I had no idea they towed it. My dad remembers those tractors, said they don't even make the ignition switches anymore. Let me know if you need someone to speak up at the next meeting." It wasn't a tidal wave, but it was the beginning of one. Karen, of course, didn't take it quietly. That night, the HOA sent a corrective notice to my door, citing community slander and unauthorized media distribution. But she made a mistake. She sent the notice by private courier, not through legal channels, which meant I could respond publicly. So I posted a side-by-side. On the left, the tractor being lifted. On the right, a scan of the Smithsonian registration with the seal front and center. Caption: "Which one's the misinformation?" The post got over 10,000 views in 24 hours. By Thursday, a local council member had picked up the thread and left a comment. "Looking into this. Federal registration should override HOA citation. Will follow up." Karen had tried to bury the story in silence, but now it was echoing, and the louder it got, the more cracks began to show. On Friday, Gerald, a soft-spoken vet who rarely left his porch, approached me with a folder. "Thought you should see this," he said. Inside were 3 HOA violation notices he'd received over the last 2 months, all for fabricated infractions, things like non-conforming hose storage and mailbox posture violations. But what caught my eye was the signature at the bottom. Not Karen's. David D., a man who'd moved out 6 months ago. Karen was issuing citations under old board members' names. She wasn't just abusing power. She was falsifying records. And suddenly this wasn't about the tractor anymore. It was about everything. The mailbox fines, the petty citations, the vanishing budget, the sudden resignations, and the fact that Karen wasn't running an HOA anymore. She was running an empire. But empires don't last forever. And mine was just starting to rise. The neighborhood had gone quiet again. But not the same kind of quiet. Not the silence of fear, like the day after the tow. This time, it was the quiet of people watching. Waiting. Like something had shifted. And everyone could feel it. Even Karen. On Saturday morning, her silver Lexus pulled up to the HOA office 3 hours early. I saw her through my kitchen window, marching inside with a folder tucked under her arm like it was a weapon. She knew the walls were closing in, because while she spent the week writing bogus citations and pushing flyers, I'd been gathering the one thing she couldn't manipulate: testimony. It started with Gerald. After he showed me those fake violations, I asked if he'd be willing to speak up. Not in a town hall, just on record. His voice. His story. He agreed. I used my niece's podcast gear, nothing fancy. Just a table mic, a quiet room, and a single question. What changed? Gerald cleared his throat and said, "I served in the military for 12 years. I've seen real threats, real discipline. But what's happening here? This isn't order. It's control. And I stayed quiet too long." That was the first recording. Then came Mrs. Patterson, who got fined $250 for having excessively whimsical lawn gnomes. Then Reggie, the young father down the street, whose porch swing was dismantled by order of the HOA because it violated kinetic aesthetic continuity. Whatever that meant. Each of them said the same thing. I thought I was the only one. By Sunday afternoon, I had 7 testimonies. All clean, all clear, all damning. And that's when I stumbled across something I hadn't been looking for. A name. Buried inside one of Karen's old email bulletins, archived on the neighborhood Google group, was a signature footer that didn't match any of the known board members. Property Compliance Managed in Partnership with Civic Alignment Strategies, LLC. Never mentioned at meetings, never listed in the HOA budget. I Googled the name. What came up? A Delaware registered entity. Single listed owner, K.M. Chambers. Karen. She'd created a shell company to funnel HOA compliance fees into her own pocket. And the worst part? That company had been subcontracted by the HOA, under her leadership, to perform all external reviews, inspections, and even neighborhood violation audits. She was fining residents through a business she owned and getting paid twice. Once by us, and once by herself. It wasn't petty anymore. This was fraud. Organized and deliberate. I called Alicia, a retired paralegal who lived 3 blocks over and used to serve on the HOA's finance committee before Karen pushed her out. When I told her what I found, she didn't hesitate. "I knew something was off," she said, "but I never thought she'd go that far." By Monday, we had a plan. Phase 1. Build a resident coalition. We weren't going to attack Karen. We weren't going to scream at meetings. We were going to document, organize, and expose. Alicia created a spreadsheet to catalog citations. We found 23 instances where notices were signed by people no longer on the board. 12 were from David D., the same man who moved away months ago. Gerald printed out physical copies of every HOA fee increase from the last 2 years, none of which were announced publicly, despite a clause in the bylaws requiring 30-day notice. And me? I started knocking on doors, not with anger, with receipts. "Did you get one of these?" I'd ask, holding up a fake citation. Most people had. Some were scared to talk. Others were relieved someone finally was. We didn't pitch a revolution. We showed them the truth. The shell company, the forged notices, the silent fee hikes. By the end of the week, we had over 40 signatures on a petition to audit the HOA's finances and board appointments. But Karen wasn't done. That Friday, she issued a security alert to the entire neighborhood. A small group of residents have begun a disinformation campaign targeting the HOA's leadership. These individuals are attempting to incite division and undermine the safety of our shared community. And beneath that, a photo. Blurry, grainy. But clearly me, standing on Gerald's front lawn, binder in hand. No caption. No name. Just fear. Just threat. She was trying to brand me as dangerous. But it backfired. Because 5 minutes after that email went out, I got a knock at my door. It was Mr. Chang. A quiet, stern man who ran the local coffee shop. He didn't say much. Just handed me a flash drive and said, "She fined me last year for having my daughter's sidewalk chalk out. I installed cameras after that. Thought you might want to see this." Inside the folder? A 5-minute video of Karen, standing at his mailbox with a clipboard, stuffing flyers into homes after dark, well past the time any official HOA correspondence was supposed to be delivered. Proof. Video. Time-stamped. Clear. And suddenly, it wasn't just her word against mine. It was her against the community. We weren't done yet. But for the first time, we weren't alone. By the time Tuesday rolled around, the petition had 63 signatures. That was over half the neighborhood. Enough to trigger a special audit. Enough to call an emergency town meeting. And enough to put Karen on notice. But instead of backing down, she went on the offensive. On Wednesday morning, every mailbox in the neighborhood had a new flyer. Same bold black font as before. Alert. Residents engaging in fraudulent campaigns may face legal consequences. No name attached, no official logo. But we all knew who sent it. I got a call from Gerald that same morning. "She just scheduled a surprise HOA meeting for Friday night," he said. "Claims it's about new landscaping proposals, but she's calling it mandatory." Mandatory? For what? To watch her perform? We decided we weren't going to wait. We were going to show up. And this time, we weren't going in quietly. Friday night, 6:45 p.m. The community center's parking lot looked different, fuller, brighter. Neighbors walked in groups instead of arriving alone. Some carried folders. Others brought lawn chairs. One woman brought cookies. Karen hadn't expected this kind of turnout. Inside, the room buzzed with energy. Nervous glances. Quiet whispers. And in the back row? Alicia and I, side by side, with Gerald holding a thick stack of sealed envelopes, each one labeled Civic Alignment Strategies, LLC, Conflict of Interest Evidence. At exactly 7 o'clock, Karen walked in. Same sunglasses, same clipboard, same look that said, "This is my kingdom." She didn't acknowledge anyone, just walked to the front and tapped the mic. "Thank you for coming," she began, her voice calm but flat. "This evening, we'll be reviewing new proposals for community fencing and floral harmony." She paused there, as if even she wasn't sure what floral harmony meant. Then she continued. "There have been unfortunate rumors circulating lately. Misinterpretations, inflammatory speech. I want to clarify. The HOA board is functioning in full accordance with the bylaws, and any claims of misconduct are completely unfounded." I stood up, calmly. "I'd like to ask a question." She froze. "Questions will be taken at the end, Mr. Holden. I believe Section 5.3 of the bylaws allows residents to raise audit-related concerns at any general meeting." Alicia backed me up. "It does. I have the clause here." Karen's smile wavered. "I'm invoking that clause," I said. "I'd like to present documentation." The room shifted. People leaned forward. Some crossed their arms. Others nodded slowly. I held up a folder and walked to the center of the room. "This is a signed registry of 63 residents requesting a financial audit of the HOA." Murmurs spread. "This," I lifted the second folder, "is a list of payment disbursements over the past 18 months, to a company called Civic Alignment Strategies. I turned to the crowd. It's owned by Karen Chambers. The air went still. She subcontracted her own company to issue violation notices, conduct inspections, and approve fee increases, all while serving as HOA president. That is a direct conflict of interest and a violation of our charter. Karen's voice cracked slightly. Those were approved consultants. Where are the contracts? Alicia asked. Where are the board votes approving them? Karen didn't answer. Gerald stepped forward, opening the envelope in his hands. These, he said, holding up printed invoices, are fake citations issued by the same company, using false dates and non-existent board members as signatories. He handed them to a neighbor in the front row. Take a look. One of them has my signature on it. I never wrote it. More silence. Then a single voice from the back. My notice said it was signed by David. He moved out last year. Heads started to turn. Mrs. Kim stood. Mine too. Reggie raised his hand. Same here. Karen took a step back from the podium. This is a coordinated smear campaign, she snapped. You're twisting everything. Alicia held up her phone. On the screen? An audio recording. Karen's voice. We don't need to win. We just need to scare them long enough to make them stop. The words echoed across the room like a gavel slam. You recorded me? Karen gasped. No, Alicia said. Gerald did, at the last closed-door meeting, the one where you barred residents from attending. Karen's face went pale. Someone from the crowd called out, Is this why my fence was flagged? Another, You fined me $400 for porch lights. The room erupted. Not into chaos, into clarity. Every neighbor now saw the same picture, and they weren't afraid anymore. Alicia stepped forward. This isn't about rebellion. It's about fairness. We have the evidence. We have the signatures. And we're calling for a vote. Karen tried to interrupt, but this time, no one listened. The room had turned. They weren't board members. They weren't followers. They were neighbors. And they were done being scared. We handed out the petitions. We collected names. We documented every question asked, every statement made, because we knew what Karen would do next. She'd deny, she'd distract, she'd retaliate. But this time, it wouldn't matter. Because now, every lie she told had a spotlight pointed straight at it. 2 days after the Friday meeting, the retaliation began. Not subtle this time, not whispers or veiled citations. It came in the form of legal paperwork. A thick white envelope appeared on Gerald's doorstep, hand-delivered and marked URGENT. Inside was a formal cease and desist letter, signed by a law firm that Karen had apparently hired using HOA discretionary funds. The accusation: defamation, harassment, unlawful collection of resident signatures. Gerald called me immediately. His voice was steady, but I could tell. He was rattled. They're threatening to sue me personally, he said, and they're saying any further attempt to gather votes will be considered fraudulent. I asked him to meet me at the library. Alicia joined us an hour later, bringing a printout of the bylaws, again. It's a scare tactic, she said. The original clauses still stand. We're within our rights. But Gerald just stared at the letter. She's trying to bleed us, he whispered. If not in court, then in time and sanity. I placed a hand on his shoulder. She's trying to make us afraid again. Because fear is the only power she's got left. But even as I said the words, I could feel the pressure mounting. That night, 3 more residents messaged me with identical letters. One even had their tractor permit revoked, not by the city, but by the HOA. Yes, the tractor again. The one that had been registered by the Smithsonian as a historical asset. The one that hadn't moved in 6 years. Karen had filed a violation saying it was agricultural machinery causing visual disharmony. The Smithsonian reference? Completely ignored. She wasn't playing the rules anymore, she was burning them. And that's when we found it. Alicia had been combing through the oldest HOA digital logs, archived PDFs, some never uploaded to the public portal. And there it was. Section 12.4.1. Emergency Oversight Clause. A clause that predated Karen's term. A clause she hadn't redlined out. It stated, in cases where HOA leadership is found to be acting in a manner inconsistent with resident safety, equity, or fiscal transparency, a 60% petitioned vote may trigger direct county oversight and an interim external review board. In plain English, if we hit 60%, the county steps in. Karen steps out. No lawsuits, no delays, no more games. We were at 54%. We needed just a few more. And Karen must have known, because that same day, she filed a motion to suspend the HOA's internal voting procedures due to external unrest. She called it a security stabilization period. There was no such thing, but she didn't care. She posted it on the HOA portal, sealed it with the board logo, and emailed it to every homeowner like it was gospel. Neighbors started calling me in a panic. Did we lose the right to vote? Is she allowed to freeze everything? She said the petitions are null now, Alicia jumped in. We need to go public, now. Gerald nodded. We take it beyond the HOA, beyond the board. So we reached out to Dana Chen, the same journalist who had broken the Elif Ramp story months ago. We didn't hold anything back this time. We gave her the fake legal letters, the tractor citation history, the Smithsonian verification, the cease and desist threats. And the cherry on top? The audio clip Gerald had forgotten was still saved on his phone from the closed meeting months earlier. Karen's voice, crystal clear. Let them scream. Let them print flyers. We'll just file them into oblivion. The next morning, the headline dropped. HOA, President accused of fraud, legal intimidation, and historic preservation violations. By Dana Chen. West County Beacon. It hit hard, and it hit everywhere. Within hours, the county received dozens of emails from residents forwarding the article. By evening, Channel 9 had called for comment. And for the first time, Karen didn't respond. She went silent. But silence doesn't equal surrender. At 4 a.m. the following night, I woke up to a loud metallic crack. I ran outside in my slippers. My tractor, the one the Smithsonian had labeled a rare Cold War agricultural innovation, had been towed. No warning, no notice, just gone. And left in its place? A laminated sign zip-tied to the tree stump beside the driveway. Unauthorized obstruction removed per HOA emergency order. That was it. No apology, no hearing. Just theft disguised as authority. I stared at the empty spot where that rusted red beast had sat for over a decade. And I made a decision. No more meetings. No more backroom talks. It was time to fight this in the open. So I called a neighborhood assembly. Not at the recreation center. At the school lawn where we'd once hosted the fall fair, where Elif had drawn chalk butterflies, where William Granger's bench had once been nearly bulldozed. By sunset, over 80 people showed up. Kids sat on laps, neighbors brought coffee. Even Gerald, tired and trembling, read aloud the full text of Section 12.4.1. And then, we passed out pens. One by one, the final signatures were gathered. 82 total. Enough for 67%. More than enough. Alicia collected the sheets, sealed them in a courier envelope, and drove to the county oversight office herself. And the next morning, a formal notice was posted at the HOA office. Effective immediately. The Westbridge Hills Homeowners Association is under temporary county review. All internal voting and enforcement actions are suspended pending external investigation. Karen's name? Nowhere on the letter. Because for the first time, she wasn't in charge anymore. Karen didn't show up to the first hearing. She sent her attorney instead. A stern-faced man in a pinstripe suit who spoke in perfectly rehearsed phrases. My client denies any wrongdoing. This is a misunderstanding. The board acted in accordance with the information available at the time. But none of that mattered, because the document spoke louder. The Smithsonian registration for the tractor, stamped and signed. The digital audit trail showing Karen personally approved the towing order, after midnight without a vote. The cease and desist letters she had commissioned under HOA funds, filed from a legal liaison service, registered to her nephew. And then came Gerald's recording, played aloud. Her voice, smug and unfiltered. Let them protest. We'll outlast them. They'll get tired. The room was silent. But it wasn't a fearful silence this time. It was focus. The kind of silence that listens not out of intimidation, but because justice is finally moving. The judge didn't ask for clarification. He didn't need it. Instead, he turned to the county review officer seated beside him. Do you have any additional findings? The officer nodded. We've completed the full audit. The HOA funds in question, over $42,000, were rerouted to 3 shell vendors. None performed actual services. All can be traced back to personal contacts of Ms. Chambers. Karen's attorney cleared his throat. We'd like to request a delay in proceedings. Denied, said the judge. Just like that. The gavel didn't fall yet, but the air shifted. Because everyone knew what came next. By law, Karen was permanently barred from participating in any HOA leadership across the state. Her personal finances were placed under review, and the county launched a formal civil case into the misuse of funds. The final clause? She was required to reimburse the full towing cost of the historic tractor and pay for its return under municipal supervision. But the tractor, that was symbolic. Because what mattered more wasn't steel and bolts. It was what we'd built beside it. The day after the verdict, neighbors gathered for the first official town rebuild event. We called it the groundbreaking. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, because this time, it wasn't about demolishing something. It was about laying a foundation. We brought folding chairs, potted plants, buckets of chalk for the kids. Alicia unveiled a new community map, created by residents, not handed down by a board. Gerald presented the draft of our restorative HOA charter, transparent voting, public audits, term limits, and a dedicated legacy zone, honoring historic contributions to the neighborhood, starting with William Granger's bench and the tractor display beside it. Yes, we brought it back, cleaned, framed, parked where every child could climb aboard, not to drive, but to remember. Because it wasn't just a machine. It was a memory, and memories matter. Lila spoke softly that day, just a few words, but they echoed through the group. I thought the bench was the end of my father's story. I didn't know it would be the beginning of ours. I looked around, at the neighbors who once kept their heads down, at the families who once feared another letter taped to their door, at Elif, now drawing chalk suns beside her rebuilt ramp. And I realized, Karen had ruled through fear, but we had rewritten everything through truth, together. There were no banners, no victory parades, just a neighborhood that had found its voice, and wasn't giving it back. Later that evening, I stood at the edge of the park, next to Gerald, next to Alicia, watching the sky turn orange above the rooftops Karen once tried to control. We didn't just win, Gerald said quietly. We changed. And he was right. Because the true legacy of what we built wasn't in what we tore down. It was in what we refused to surrender. Our stories, our memories, our unity. The final plaque was installed a week later, beside the tractor. Bronze, simple, unshakable. To those who stood when silence seemed safer. To the stories that built this street. To the voices that never stopped. This is your home, and no one takes that away.